Yeah, I've seen those clips where Jeselnik is going after Hinchcliffe and calling him a hack. And then he also says about Matt Rife, he says all roads lead to me, talking about himself in terms of Matt Rife, basically saying that, Matt Rife is kind of copying his style to an extent. And he also says, what else did he say? Oh, I'm sure Gordon Ramsay isn't worried when McDonald's makes 1 billion hamburgers a day or something.
He's 100% right about Tony Hinchcliffe. Hinchcliffe's ego is pretty insane, and it's like palpable in those interviews that he's been doing, like things that he says about Kill Tony as a show and just himself in general. It's like, it is pretty insane. And I heard that Matt Rife quote before, but honestly, it's kind of funny that he says that about himself. All roads lead to me. Like, there's some truth to that, but it's a pretty egotistical thing to say as well. I mean, Jeselnik is influential, but he's not that influential. I would connect Matt Rife to somebody more like Dane Cook or something.
Even Dane Cook had a moment where he was like, he felt like he was perceived too much as like the hokey, mainstream, girl-friendly comedian. And so he had this special that he was like, where it was like, dark. I'm making dark jokes about rape and suicide and, punching people in the face.
Yeah, it's funny that a lot of those comedians that are like that end up having to do that, like, dark, extra edgy special, the unrated one. And then they release a DVD cut of it that's got like 5 extra minutes. So I guess that's more the early 2000s version. But yeah, that's always how it was. But not to get too sidetracked on Dane Cook, but do you know that dude's story, man? Like all the crazy stuff that happened with him. I listened to his WTF and like I've seen a couple like YouTube videos on him and stuff. And like, yeah, he did have that like meteoric rise with that, stool humper bullshit comedy. But then like it turns out his brother, his like legit blood brother, was his manager, and he stole like millions of dollars or over $1 million from him, some insane amount, like almost all of Dane Cook's money. And Dane Cook ended up having him put in jail, which, say what you want about it or whatever. I don't know. I would definitely do something even to my brother if they stole that much money from me and just, lied to me and ripped me off for years. But, I hate cops, so I don't know. I'd figure something else out. But whatever the case, had him put in jail and then had to, like, do all these, like, crazy specials and tours and stuff like that. Or tours, not specials. But to try and recoup money, and has been, like, playing catch up ever since then. I think finally a couple years ago got back to where he was or whatever, and it's like sad, and you want to be like sympathetic for him, but he just still sucks so bad and all of his comedy so bad. And it's like you listen to that and you start feeling like, okay, all right, man, maybe I've been too hard on Dane Cook over these years, but then you see his new special and it's just absolute garbage. And you realize, like, oh shit, he's 52 and he just married a 25-year-old? Or no, my bad. He was 51 at the time and she was 24. Excuse me. And it's just like, this guy's just gross and crappy.
Yeah, plus Dane Cook, had that weird, he had all that Botox and stuff. And to me, that's always an indicator of somebody who's focused on the wrong things. It's like, it's not the worst thing in the world, but that shows the Hollywood brain. You know what I mean? Like, if you're altering your face in order to look younger and stuff like that, it's just, it never reflects well, especially as a comedian. It's like, what are you even doing? You're not even in movies anymore. And I think a lot of times it just makes them look worse. So yeah, I haven't, Dane Cook is pretty gross. I did like his comedy specials when I was younger. I think we talked about this. You were a little older at that time because you're, an old, elderly senior citizen about to die soon, probably next year or something. So, at that time you were a little bit past that age, but for me it was like the perfect age where he was kind of like a gateway into comedy for me a little bit. So, I think that there's some merit to some of that material. Like, there are jokes of his that I still remember. But I think all of Louis C.K.'s criticisms of him were pretty accurate, and ultimately he's just a pretty vapid guy. I don't think he's a bad guy. I don't even necessarily think he's like a horrible joke thief. I just think he's pretty vapid. And the weirdest thing about him is that Patrice O'Neal like fought for him, you know what I mean? Like defended him often. and pretty strongly, you know. And I've always thought that was strange because, you know, Patrice O'Neal was such a stickler about who's funny and who's not, and who's a hack and who's not. And Dane Cook was always just such an odd choice. I don't know if there's anybody else that you could pick out that Patrice O'Neal was a defender of that is kind of a questionable choice, but for some reason he liked Dane Cook. I don't know why.
Oh, sorry for the late reply. I actually died for a moment there, and my life alert system went off, and they came and got me off the ground. So, as far as that Dane Cook stuff goes, no, that's right. I think it just hit more your age group. It was targeted more at the time. And there's nothing wrong with him in general, I guess. It's just not for me, and I think he's kind of just a gross, like, bro guy. Not my type of dude, but not, like, criminally bad. Like, he doesn't need to be canceled, just, like, I have no interest in paying attention to him at all, more so. That's really interesting about Patrice O'Neal. I did not know that, and that does seem odd. But I'd say that speaks to Dane's character. I would assume so, at least, you know. Patrice saw something there. Far be it from me to disagree with the great Patrice O'Neal. Other than on a litany of his, like, misogynistic shit. But, you know, we're talking about comedy.
Oh, yeah, I'm surprised you didn't know that. You should look it up, because there's a couple conversations that Patrice had with Mark Maron about that, because Mark Maron had that famous podcast with Dane Cook where he's giving him a real hard time. And then there's a clip of Opie and Anthony with Patrice O'Neal where Mark Maron just happens to walk in, and they talk about it a little bit. And then I think when Patrice did What the Fuck, they didn't talk about that. I think they just talked more about Patrice in general. But that Opie and Anthony clip is really interesting if you want some insight into why Mark Maron was giving him shit and why Patrice thinks he's a good dude. That's a great clip to watch. It's probably like, I don't know, 20 minutes or something.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to check that out. You know, I don't think I've listened to that WTF anyway. Maybe I have, but it's just been so long I don't recall it. But the Opie and Anthony show, for sure. Opie and Anthony show, Jesus. You know, I used to like that show, but looking back, it really was just the original Kill Tony, you know, like, some jackasses getting a big ego and thinking they're making and breaking other jackasses. And in the sense that it became like that thing, a stop you have to make if you're going through the area doing comedy. You got to stop there. It's the obligatory place. You know, stop and kiss the ring.
And honestly, it's probably worse than Kill Tony, just because they would have actual, like, discussions on there, like political discussions, debates, stuff like that, especially when Patrice was on there. And I just remember Anthony Cumia saying some of the worst shit ever. Like, that show was probably a step in the direction of comedy becoming more and more right-wing. And Patrice O'Neal was always a pretty bright spot on it, but at the same time, he would fall into some of the same shit, and for some reason, he entertained Anthony's bullshit on that a lot. And I really do wonder where Patrice O'Neal would fall on the political spectrum today. I mean, he would have got canceled a long time ago, probably for all kinds of shit that we haven't even heard about. And in the Patrice WTF episode, he talks about, like, how he got caught up in a case when he was younger, like, I think a teenager. But he tells the whole story, and it's like, from the way he tells it is that he and his friends, like, had gangbanged a girl, and then afterwards she accused him of rape. And there was a little bit more to the story, like the reason why she did that, because somebody else did something fucked up to her, like threatened to blackmail her with that information that had happened. And so then she accused him of, like, he blackmailed her into having sex with him, and then so she accused him of rape, and then also roped the rest of them into the story. And so that's the story as he tells it. And he actually did a little bit of jail time for that when he was younger. But, none of that. His story definitely wouldn't fly by today's standards. So, I always say it was probably good that Patrice died when he did, because he already was having a pretty struggling career. He probably would not have made it in the new era. But it's hard to say, because he thought differently than most people. So it's entirely possible that his ability to think through things could have sort of established him in a different place. I mean, even Joey Diaz had some pretty gnarly accusations come up the other year, maybe like 6 years ago or something, where apparently when Joey Diaz was running a club at some point, he would like make female comics like suck his dick so that they could get on stage. Just pretty gross stuff. And the crazy thing about that is he never was accused by any of them. He just said it himself. He just like laughed about that story and told it on Joe Rogan, and I think they both laughed about it. And that was a big deal for a second. People were pretty upset about that, but Joey Diaz, I think he still does a podcast. Like, he just was like, fuck you, I don't care, I'm not, I don't care about none of this shit, like, it is what it is, and just kept doing stuff, and kind of never went away. So, I mean, he's been marginalized for sure, and I think Joe Rogan stopped having him on for a while because of that. But point being, Patrice was a particular kind of guy, and if he was still around, it would be interesting to see where he would fall in all of this. Because some of his beliefs were very reactionary. Like you said, he was real misogynist, and he even had some like pretty racist beliefs. But he also kind of tended in the left-wing direction. Like he was sort of in the like Occupy Wall Street, Black Lives Matter type of wavelength. So I don't know, he's an interesting character. But both that episode of Opie and Anthony, him on WTF is a pretty good episode. It's a little bit of a bummer, but it's a good episode. And that you should watch the WTF with Dane Cook, because it's a great example of Mark being like probably more contentious than he is with like 98% of his guests. That's one of the all-time great episodes.